Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, GitLab. My name is Christopher Leffoltz. I am the VP of Development. This is the development group conversation. Please add your questions to the group conversation document if you can get in there. Thanks everybody who previewed the approximately 35 folks who previewed the video, and I'm looking forward to questions.
Hi, Christopher. Thanks for the presentation, the video. On slide 6, you talk about the largest contentful paint. I think the guideline is to measure the 75th slowest percentile. I don't know what we are doing in this graph.
Good question. So actually it's documented on the page, or at least it should be documented on the page because I checked it this morning because I was looking at it to see that it actually got updated. It's actually right now measuring at the 90th percentile rather than the 75th. I know guidance is the 75th percentile. We're using, I believe, Grafana to basically pull back this information. And the 75th percentile wasn't an option for us, but the 90th was. So we set the bar a little bit higher to reflect that. And Tim Solomons here in case, Tim, you want to add any other color to that question.
Yeah, so the default measurement that Sitespeed is doing, where we are getting the measurement of LCP from at the moment, is always doing the P90. So that's where we are currently getting the data from. The other idea around that KPI at the moment, because this is just a representation of one route of 100 free routes that we are monitoring in total, is to have another look as soon as we are getting now over in the next quarter also into more and more routes, is to rather have perhaps as a KPI how many are below 2.5 seconds, because this is just like one slice of 100 routes of the whole product and gives a good representation of one of the most used routes, of one of the 5 most used routes, but doesn't give you a full picture on everything, because the big question is also, as you are a user and you're visiting 50 different pages in GitLab while you're working on it, but then you hit one of the pages which takes 17 seconds to load or 10 seconds to load, most probably this will be rather the part that you remember, instead of if you have 2.4 seconds or 2.6 seconds on all the other 19 or 39 pages. So this is something we are currently looking into. And we are basically transferring more and more data into Sisense as we are taking it up from Sitespeed.
Cool. That's really, thanks for that context, and it's really awesome that we're at the 90th percentile. We're already kind of meeting the guideline. Is this a synthetic monitoring, or is this real user monitoring? And if it's synthetic, what project is it measuring?
It's synthetic in the sense of that we have a GCP instance which is running Sitespeed, which is really going, is starting up Chrome and is hitting that route, I think, every 3 or every 4 hours. And that is currently what we are measuring. The other part that we are looking at on the real user metrics is that we are having also some data from the Chrome user experience report and out of Google Search Console, so from real users that are providing that. And that is another data part that we are currently just looking at manually. But right now, this is synthetically in the sense that we are monitoring for real. So we see definitely also a lot of fluctuation on some pages that we need to fix. So some pages have just a fluctuation of 50 to 100 milliseconds, which feels natural, but some have even, depending on the day of time, also 400, 600 milliseconds. And that is something that shouldn't happen. We shouldn't see if we have a lot of users or not, but rather have more flat line as our competitors have, as we are monitoring that also.
Cool. I don't see any other questions, so let me, please allow me to ask one more question for clarification. Are we measuring, what project are we measuring? Are we measuring a project that has only one issue, or are we measuring like a heavy project like GitLab org?
No, so for the 5 most used routes, we are using 5 routes that were also measured by forgeperf.org. which is set up by a competitor. And we have a project, I'm more than happy to link to it, where we are listing all the pages. So for example, the project homepage, I believe we are monitoring on the GitLab project, on the one that, for example, also our competitor is measuring, and on the third one, so that we have different cases. The issue detail page, we have, I think, 5 or 6 different use cases that we are monitoring, so that we have small issues with tons of comments, etc., etc. And there's a full project and a full list of URLs that we are measuring. And for the ones that we need to measure through logged in, we have a test user that we are adding to some test projects and to some real projects. But we are looking always to have a real use case and not like an empty thing.
Cool. And I still don't see any other questions, so I'll allow myself to do one more. I think our score on this page, which is done by a competitor, Drew, has improved a lot. If I'm eyeballing this, like compared to GitHub, we're doing a lot better than we used to do. Is that correct?
Yes.
Well, what do you think? I should ask.
Yeah, we have definitely improved. We have, over the last 2 quarters, we have invested a lot. We have reduced the CSS that we are loading. We have reduced the JavaScript that we are loading. We have improved tons of API calls that we are using. So simply the startup time and the performance that we are seeing also on Lighthouse, which is more of a combination of the LCP and all the other web vitals, is huge. One of the big things that we also improved, we cut even in half, is the first paint. So really the first time something hits the screen, there we are almost everywhere faster than our competitors, as we are rendering already the menus. So this gives you the faster perceived performance also on top. And but yeah, we have definitely improved a lot, I would say.
Cool. It's clear that data is bearing that out. Thanks so much to you and everyone else for doing that. It's an amazing how fast we improve this. Really proud of the team.
Krista, you have the next question?
Yeah, looking at slide 9, and one of the bullets talks about an experimentation working group. So I scanned quickly through that. I thought I was excited to see that this is happening. I know the growth department has been doing a ton of experimentation with some really interesting and exciting results. So the idea that other teams can follow that lead is awesome. And then I looked at the participants in the working group, and they are from the growth section, which is very appropriate. So would love to hear you just talk a little bit more about the working group, what we expect to get out of it, and how we expect teams to use it once there's something available.
Yeah, I think my expectation is that if you look at a lot of more sophisticated is not the right word because we're pretty sophisticated. Let's say more mature companies, particularly in the data analytics model, they do a lot of A/B testing. And initially, the idea behind this team was a lot of A/B testing within the areas that they viewed as kind of the critical areas to the business in the short term. But really, we should be doing that kind of across the board, both for user experience as well as for potential customer engagement. So if you asked me at the heart of that question, I think that's really the way I think about that working group and kind of what we're trying to achieve there. This is largely being run, like you said, out of the growth team, but creating a self-service model is, if you ever tried to have created a self-service model, it's actually really hard, and creating that takes time. So that's a good reason for us to kind of basically set ourselves up for that capability within the organization. The other aspect is that if we do this well enough, it might be eventually a part of the product that our customers might actually use too, right? So like that's another consideration that kind of goes along with it. But I don't know if that's necessarily explicit in the working group goals. I think it's more of let's get it self-service within our own team so that product managers have more freedom to do experiments quickly and understand what's going on.
Great, thank you.
Nicholas has some extra help there.
Just one of the outcomes of this working group is an experiment gem that one of the growth engineers started building and is now already like trying to integrate into GitLab. And it's now using our current feature flags, but maybe you want to or can use Unleash in the future. So yeah, that's work that is currently being done, and we want to integrate it soon and start the first experiment with that.
Yeah, and special shout out for the work there. If any development members want to start playing around with it, I definitely think the team would be willing to accept feedback and collaboration on it.
I'll ask another one since no one else is asking questions, and I can try and type it in after I've asked it. So I see also on that same slide that y'all have a dog food plan working group, and that y'all are gonna dog food iterations. The UX department, design in particular, has been doing the same thing. So we dog fooded iterations at a small scale during Q3, and then during Q4, the expectation is that every designer will dog food iterations. The team has rightfully had a lot of questions about what that means for designers, how they might use it. And so we've been working through that. I would like to hear how the development department intends to dog food iterations.
Yeah, so there's two different aspects to this. One aspect is the dog fooding of the feature itself, which is being done by the plan team, where they have the ability to proactively fix and address issues. And then there's the expansion of that to other development teams associated with that. So one of the key features that's coming up is the filtering capability. Basically provides the ability to still have a single iteration within a project, but to be able to basically have different teams look at it from different aspects of it, which I think would be super valuable. So one of the best examples of this probably is we have a pretty aggressive plan to deliver on some fulfillment activities. And basically, rather than going in a monthly milestone type of cadence and organization information that way, we're looking at like weekly sprints or bi-weekly sprints associated with that, where we can kind of measure progress associated with that. So that's a good example of another team that's planning to use it. The filtering capability, until that's in place, it's a little bit harder to do, but still that's the fundamental expectation is that the fulfillment team leverages that. So if there's a development team out there that wants to go to the model of, say, weekly updates, this is a good way to potentially view it. Even in a Kanban model, you could conceive of, okay, we're going to set up the work for this week. This is expectations. People pull it off as they get to the highest priority thing. And then at the end of the week, we can measure that associated with that. You are locked into the overall iteration cadence, which I think right now is every 2 weeks. So that's one thing that also we have to basically update to get a better dog food experience. That team is also working on swim lanes. I can't articulate yet what that means. I apologize, but that's the other aspect is that from that working group's perspective, they're further expanding it to other parts of the plan feature set.
Thank you. That's a good explanation. So what we've told the designers is use iteration to break your own work down, because you don't go from zero, there's an idea, to, hey, here's a fully formed idea, development, go. There are a lot of steps along the way that get you there. And so we're trying to use it to increase transparency into that process. So for example, having issues that are focused on that ideation where people can participate in that divergence of ideas, and then issues that are focused on, okay, now we've converged. This is what we think the solution is. Here's an issue for mock-ups, and then there's an issue for research, so that we're doing them in those smaller time boxes and kind of get to a state where we say, okay, now everyone's been involved, it's been transparent, now we're ready for development to pick this up. And then our expectation would be that development would then use iterations to break that back down into smaller pieces to implement and deliver. What I'm hearing is it sounds like the guidance that we're giving designers flows into what you are then asking developers to do.
Yeah, I think so. Like the idea of breaking things down more so you get to the point of tighter constrained issues that people can work on. Generally speaking, that's always a better development experience because people like to know what they're actually working on, rather than, you know, there's like a piece of it that you still want to figure out, but the what, if the what is understood, it's a lot easier than figuring out the how, right, so to speak. That is an interesting observation. You know, my assertion is that you would see issue counts go up based on that. And if you want help with that, Lily could probably throw together a couple of quick, you know, historical versus what's happening today to see whether there's adjustment associated with it. Wouldn't recommend looking at it long term, but it would be interesting to see from the perspective of issue volume. From that perspective, it also, you know, test the system as well, because we'll have higher volume associated with that.
Okay, that's interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, there's always the test to break, right? So like, when do you break it down too much, right? Or when does it become too onerous to basically create? Like, I'd be fearful of any time we got to one issue per MR, but you know, that's a consideration as an example. Tim, you had some comments in there when Christy and I were going back and forth.
Sorry, I was focused already on the next question. Are we on a Nicholas question, or are we still on the dog fooding?
You just had a dog fooding comment. I didn't know if you want to verbalize it.
Yeah, so we have formed the working group in the last quarter, and they are really focused on all the iteration part and using that for ourselves, which was a feature in its very early state. We figured out a couple of things. We have used it. We are more than happy to hand it over now to fulfillment to work with it, and looking at that at the moment. And the main other focus is really to take this work and expand it also to other teams, and not only work with the inside those plan teams. So embrace yourself. You will get a lot of advertising for Epic swim lanes and how awesome they are and how awesome they will be to all the teams and all the different counterparts. So as we have people from all the different areas in the working group, we are trying to roll out Epic swim lanes to as many teams as possible. We have set the OKR of 13 areas. And really introduce those to the teams, what they can benefit from, do videos on that, do introductions on that, do AMAs, etc. in the next couple of weeks. And yeah, and hopefully get a lot of feedback from it, and also refine and tweak the parts that make it from good to great.
Cool. Well, every stage group should be using iterations to some extent this quarter, because every designer should be using iterations. So we should get some broad-based usage, and we expect really good feedback.
Cool. We'll move on to the next question. Nicholas, you have it?
Yeah, this is more like an internal advertising question. So my question was, like, if I'm an engineer and I want to pick up some work because I have time between product work, is there an epic that I can go to and pick a small, a big, middle-sized issue and improve GitLab performance? And thanks, Tim, for pointing to the epics.
Well, Tim, you put that information there. Appreciate everybody who wants to go look at that. Also, don't forget, if you see a problem and you have a quick fix, I forget what the term we used for it was. Is just fix stuff, I think is the term we used. I'll find the handbook link after the call, but we have that option for engineers as well. So if you have something that's going to take not a lot of time and it just needs to be fixed because it's driving you nuts, please go fix it, because that's important as well. Mac, you have the next one?
Thank you. Yeah, on the topic of realignments, we have done a number of these now. And since you have the largest team in engineering and the biggest impact, I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are on the team gearing up for change, and if there's any pattern to replicate for success if future opportunity happens to set the team for success.
Yeah, good question. I always think back to, there was a TV commercial back, I think it was in the 90s, early 2000s, where they've kind of made fun of like the fact that people, you know, their jobs, like, what do you grow up? You want to grow up to be a fireman or a professional sports figure. You don't want to grow up to be a middle manager. So, you know, I think realignments in general isn't something we think about when we're thinking about our careers. Though I think in general, actually realignments are actually the best opportunity in some ways. Though I know people in the moment don't feel that way, but it is an opportunity to kind of look at the landscape and say, okay, oh, I could help contribute over here, and I could actually, you know, do it in a different way. A lot of times when I've been in situations where I've been in a reorganization, that's actually been an opportunity for me to pick up some additional aspect for career development. So at a high level, I would say I would definitely not say we're hitting it out of the park or getting an A on it. I think we're probably somewhere between a low B and a high C, to be honest. But I think that's because change is hard, and it takes action, and it takes deliberation, and it takes people accepting it, right? So I think that all those things are kind of components of it. The other part is like the actual debate about when to make change is also a key component of this. So as far as the execution goes, I feel like we've done a fairly good job of doing our best to explain the situation. We've done a fairly good job of giving people the opportunity to make sure that where they can provide input, we get that input so that we can do the best both for them and the business. I still think we have a lot of improvement in the communication area, just in general of overarching communication. I think we're doing a good job of getting the right message, but we're not probably doing enough multimodal communication, or at least that's a consistent feedback, as communication is still a challenge for us from that perspective. The other thing is we're really not geared towards we're geared towards moving. I don't know if we're geared towards moving quickly yet from that perspective. Like, we don't think in terms of, okay, I'm going to get done with this week, and if things change next week, you know, I'll adjust appropriately. There certainly could be a debate about whether, you know, we want to have that level of flexibility. But that's, you know, like, given the more recent ones have been much faster from a need perspective, that's a consideration that we think about. So that's kind of my high level thoughts. I don't know if you have any feedback, Mac, from the perspective. The other thing is, I think what happens oftentimes is we do realignments and we look a few weeks after. I think it's actually many months after that you have to really evaluate, because, you know, like, people settling in takes time from that perspective. So seeing how new team formations happen, those kinds of things is also consideration. And really, you don't get that data until 2 to 3 months after the fact.
Yeah, the message on focusing on new opportunities really speak to me, because as we are affected, we message that new opportunities, but it's also a higher priority for the company. So feel proud that you're going to make a bigger impact on a higher need for the business. So that seems to resonate well with what I've seen so far.
Yeah, and from everything I've heard, when I give that grade, it's really the execution of management. It's not the individuals involved. The individuals involved have been awesome in regards to asking good questions, being professional, and really embracing that aspect of the moving.
So, Christopher, I just wanted to say I really appreciated Eric's addition to the handbook about embracing change. I think that we can do a better job of preparing the team for change by sharing the benefits and explaining that it's actually a skill to be able to be adaptable and flexible, just like our code. So I think that when it's slow and we're not making a lot of realignments or reorganizations, that's the time to really prep the team. So I thought that handbook edition was a step in the right direction.
Agree completely.
Yeah, and I wanted to point out that, you know, from the perspective of change management, the human elements of change management are really complex and involved, and they take a lot of focus and effort from people. And I think it's, you know, as someone been involved in some of these, that's sort of been my top priority, because I think we do the, excuse the terminology, but the more mechanical elements, I think we do an excellent job of already. And so I feel like that's an important area of focus for us.
Yeah, I think that's good feedback, which is why I added the issue at the end for feedback, because I think that's something that we have to think about and figure out how we can best address, to your point, Dan.
To close out, I just want to jump in as someone involved in the middle of this. And from a company perspective, I can definitely see the reasons behind the one I was involved in. And it was a great decision. And the way it was handled by Darva and all of the management, I don't think it could have done better. So, my perspective, I think it went well.
Thanks, Chad. Appreciate it. Appreciate the comment. So keep me honest, a good sign of a meeting is ending on time. We're a little bit over, but I think we got to the end of the questions. And I want to thank everybody for a great conversation, and everybody have a great